The letter that changed my life arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier who had no idea that the envelope in his hands contained enough money to transform my existence. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills and wondering how I was going to make the mortgage payment that was due in 3 days. The light in the kitchen was gray and weak, filtering through windows that hadn't been washed in months because I couldn't afford to hire someone to do it, and I didn't have the energy to do it myself. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, a skin of congealed cream floating on its surface, but I hadn't noticed. I was too busy calculating numbers in my head, trying to find a way to stretch my depleted bank account to cover expenses that far exceeded my income. The construction company I had built from nothing, the company that had supported my family for 15 years, was on the verge of bankruptcy. 2 major clients had defaulted on their payments. 3 projects had been put on hold indefinitely. My employees, men and women who had worked for me for years, who had families of their own to support, were looking at me with fear in their eyes, wondering if their jobs were going to disappear. And I had no answers for them. I had nothing but a stack of bills and a dwindling bank account, and the crushing, suffocating weight of failure pressing down on my shoulders. My wife Elena was at work, teaching 4th grade at the local elementary school, a job she loved, but that paid barely enough to cover groceries and utilities. My children, Sophie and Michael Jr., were at school, blissfully unaware of the financial catastrophe that was about to engulf our family. We had already cut back on everything we could. No more dinners out. No more vacations. No more new clothes or new toys or new anything. We were down to the bare essentials, and even those were slipping through our fingers like sand. I had spent the past 3 months lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I was going to tell my family that we were going to lose everything. The house, the business, the life we had built together. All of it, gone, because of circumstances beyond my control and mistakes that I couldn't undo. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of expensive cream-colored paper that felt luxurious to the touch, the kind of paper that spoke of old money and established wealth in a world that was completely foreign to me. The return address was a law firm in the city, one of those old, distinguished firms with names like Whitmore, Sterling, and Chase lined up in gold embossed letters on the upper left corner. I turned the envelope over in my hands, frowning. I had never heard of Whitmore, Sterling, and Chase. I had never done business with them. I had no reason to receive a letter from a law firm that looked like it had been in existence since before the Civil War. My first thought was that it was bad news. A lawsuit, perhaps. A final demand for payment on one of the many debts I had accumulated. Some legal action that would be the final nail in the coffin of my dying company. I opened the envelope with a knife from the kitchen drawer, my movements slow and reluctant, the way a man might open a letter informing him of a terminal diagnosis. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed on the same cream-colored stationery as the envelope, with the firm's letterhead embossed in gold at the top. I began to read, and by the time I finished, my hands were shaking so badly that the paper rattled in my grip. "Dear Mr. Donovan," the letter began. "We are writing to inform you that you have been named as the sole beneficiary of the estate of the late Mr. Jonathan Ashford. Mr. Ashford passed away 3 months ago at the age of 87. The estate includes liquid assets, property, and investments totaling approximately $12 million. However, there is a condition attached to this inheritance. Mr. Ashford specified in his last will and testament that you must fulfill a certain requirement before the funds can be released to you. We request your presence at our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the terms of this bequest. Please contact us immediately to schedule an appointment. Sincerely, Jonathan Whitmore, Senior Partner." $12 million. The number was so large, so impossibly vast, that I couldn't fully comprehend it. I read the letter 3 times, certain that there had been a mistake. A prank. A scam. Some kind of elaborate fraud designed to prey on desperate people like me. I had never heard of Jonathan Ashford. I had no wealthy relatives, no hidden benefactors, no connection to anyone who could possibly leave me that kind of money. I was the son of a high school teacher and a nurse, a man who had worked with his hands his entire life, who had built his business from nothing and was now watching it crumble back into nothing. Why would a complete stranger leave me $12 million? And yet, the letter looked real. The paper was real. The law firm was real. I looked it up online and found a website that was professional and well-established, with a history that dated back to 1887. Jonathan Whitmore was real. His photograph was on the website, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and a kind, intelligent face. The firm had handled some of the largest estates in the state, had represented some of the wealthiest families in the country. This was not a scam. This was real. But there was a condition. Of course there was a condition. There was always a condition. The letter didn't specify what the condition was, but it made clear that the inheritance was not automatic. I would have to do something, fulfill some requirement, before the money would be released. And as I sat at my kitchen table, the cold coffee congealing in its mug, the stack of unpaid bills staring up at me like an accusation, I knew that I was going to find out what that condition was. I had no choice. My family had no choice. Whatever Jonathan Ashford wanted from me, I would have to do it. I called the law firm that afternoon, my hands still shaking as I dialed the number. The receptionist who answered had a voice that was polished and professional, the voice of someone who had been trained to handle calls from the wealthy and the powerful. When I told her my name, there was a brief pause, and then she said, "Yes, Mr. Donovan. Mr. Whitmore has been expecting your call. Please hold, and I'll transfer you." The hold music was classical, something by Bach or maybe Beethoven, the kind of music that was designed to be soothing, but that only made me more anxious. I gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles ached, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing through 1,000 different possibilities. What could the condition be? What could a dead man possibly want from me? The music clicked off, and a new voice came on the line. "Mr. Donovan, this is Jonathan Whitmore. Thank you for calling. I'm sure you have a great many questions, and I'll do my best to answer them." His voice was exactly what I had expected. Calm, measured, reassuring. The voice of a man who had spent decades guiding wealthy families through the complexities of estate law. He sounded like the kind of person who never raised his voice, never lost his temper, never allowed himself to be flustered by anything. I found myself trusting him immediately, even though I knew that trust was probably premature. "The letter says I've been named as a beneficiary," I said, my voice coming out more steadily than I felt. "But I don't understand. I've never heard of Jonathan Ashford. I have no idea who he is or why he would leave me anything. Is this some kind of mistake?" "No mistake," Whitmore said. "Mr. Ashford was very specific in his instructions. He left detailed records explaining his decision, and I can assure you that everything is in order. However, as the letter indicated, there is a condition attached to the inheritance. Mr. Ashford specified that you must fulfill this condition exactly as written. It cannot be negotiated. It cannot be waived. If you choose not to fulfill it, the entire estate will be donated to a list of charities that Mr. Ashford designated. Those are the terms." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What is the condition?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do I have to do?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that suggested Whitmore was choosing his next words very carefully. I could hear him shuffling papers, perhaps consulting a file or a document. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle, almost sympathetic, as if he knew that what he was about to say would be difficult for me to hear. "Mr. Ashford specified that you must forgive someone," he said. "A specific person, named in the will. You must meet with this person in my office, with witnesses present. You must tell them, verbally and in writing, that you forgive them for the harm they caused you. You must sign a legal document to that effect. Only then will the funds be released." Forgive someone. The words echoed in my mind, strange and foreign. Forgive someone. Who could I possibly need to forgive? I had no enemies, no grudges, no long-standing feuds with anyone. I was an ordinary man leading an ordinary life. What harm had anyone done to me that was so significant it required formal forgiveness? "Who?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who do I have to forgive?" Another pause, longer this time, and then Whitmore spoke the name that I had spent 15 years trying to forget. The name of the man who had destroyed my family. The name of the man I hated more than anyone else in the world. The name that still, after all these years, made my blood boil and my hands clench into fists. Vincent Crane, Whitmore said. You must forgive Vincent Crane. He is the person named in the will. The world seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, my knuckles white, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples, in my wrists, in the base of my throat where my pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. Vincent Crane. The name hit me like a physical blow, like a punch to the stomach that knocked the air from my lungs and left me gasping. Vincent Crane. The man who had killed my brother. The man who had been driving drunk on a rainy night 15 years ago, who had run a red light and plowed into my brother's car, killing him instantly. The man who had walked away from the accident with minor injuries, who had shown no remorse at the trial, who had served only 6 years in prison for vehicular manslaughter and then gone on with his life as if nothing had happened. The man I had spent 15 years hating with every fiber of my being. The man whose name I couldn't speak without feeling a surge of rage so powerful it consumed everything else. No, I said, my voice cold and hard and utterly certain. Absolutely not. There is no amount of money in the world that could make me forgive that monster. You don't know what he did. You don't know what he took from me. I know exactly what he did, Whitmore said quietly. Mr. Ashford was aware of the situation. He knew about your brother, about the accident, about the trial. He knew about Vincent Crane. In fact, that's why he chose you. He was connected to the case, in a way. He followed it closely, and he believed that you deserved a chance to heal. He believed that forgiveness was the only way for you to move forward with your life. I don't want to heal, I said, my voice rising. I don't want to move forward. I want justice. I want Vincent Crane to suffer the way my brother suffered. I want him to pay for what he did. Has he not paid? Whitmore asked, his voice still calm, still measured. He spent 6 years in prison. He lost his job, his marriage, his reputation. He has spent the past 15 years living with the knowledge that he took an innocent life. Whether he shows it or not, whether you believe it or not, he has paid. And now you have a choice to make. You can continue to carry this hatred, to let it consume you the way it has consumed you for 15 years. Or you can let it go. Not for Vincent Crane. For yourself. I didn't respond. I couldn't respond. The words were stuck in my throat, choked off by the rage and the grief and the overwhelming unfairness of it all. How could a stranger, a dead man I had never met, ask this of me? How could anyone ask this of me? I know this is difficult, Whitmore said gently. I know this is not what you expected to hear, but I would urge you to consider the offer carefully. $12 million is a substantial sum. It could change your life. It could change your family's life. The offer will remain open for 30 days. Take some time. Think about it. Talk to your wife. And when you're ready, call me. I hung up the phone and stood in my kitchen, my hands trembling, my mind reeling. $12 million. Enough to pay off every debt I owed. Enough to save my company, to keep my employees working, to provide for my wife and children. Enough to transform our lives completely. Enough to ensure that my children would never have to worry about money the way I had worried about it. Enough to give them the future they deserved, the future I had been failing to provide. But the price was forgiveness. The price was letting go of the hatred that had defined me for 15 years. The price was looking Vincent Crane in the eye and telling him that I no longer blamed him for what he had done. The price was betraying my brother's memory. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift and change as the hours crawled by. Elena was asleep beside me, her breathing slow and steady, her face peaceful in the dim light from the window. She didn't know yet. I hadn't told her about the letter or the phone call or the impossible choice I was facing. I didn't know how to tell her. I didn't know how to explain that our salvation was within reach, but that the cost might be more than I could bear. My brother's name was Michael, and he had been 3 years older than me. He had been my protector, my role model, my best friend. He had taught me how to ride a bike, running alongside me with his hand on the back of the seat, letting go only when he was sure I could balance on my own. He had taught me how to throw a curveball, spending hours in the backyard with me, patient and encouraging, never once losing his temper when I got it wrong. He had been the one who stood up to the bullies who tormented me in middle school, the ones who called me names and shoved me in the hallways and made my life a misery. He had been the best man at my wedding, standing beside me at the altar with a grin on his face and tears in his eyes, telling me that he was proud of me, that he was happy for me, that he knew I was going to have a wonderful life. And then he had been gone. A rainy night in October. A drunk driver who ran a red light. A collision that was so violent it tore Michael's car in half. The police officer who came to my door at 3 a.m, his face grim and sympathetic, telling me that my brother had been killed instantly, that he hadn't suffered, that there was nothing anyone could have done. I remember the way my legs had given out beneath me, the way I had collapsed onto the floor of my apartment, the way the world had seemed to stop spinning for a moment and then restart at a different, wronger angle. My brother was dead. My brother was dead, and nothing was ever going to be the same again. The man who killed him was named Vincent Crane. He was 28 years old, a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company, a man with no prior criminal record and no history of violence. On the night of the accident, he had been at a bar with colleagues, celebrating a promotion. He had drunk too much, far too much, but he had decided to drive home anyway, convinced that he was fine, that he was in control, that the rules that applied to other people didn't apply to him. He had run a red light going 50 miles an hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. He had hit my brother's car broadside, killing Michael instantly. And he had walked away with a broken arm and a concussion and a few minor cuts and bruises. The trial was a nightmare. Vincent Crane's lawyers argued that he was a good man who had made a terrible mistake, that he was remorseful, that he deserved leniency. They brought in character witnesses who testified about his kindness, his generosity, his involvement in his community. They made him seem like a saint who had simply had a moment of poor judgment. And the jury believed them. 6 years. That was the sentence. 6 years for taking my brother's life. 6 years for destroying my family. My parents didn't survive the trial. Not their marriage, anyway. They had been together for 30 years. But the grief of losing their eldest son tore them apart. They divorced within a year of Michael's death, unable to look at each other without seeing the ghost of the child they had lost. My mother moved across the country, to a small town in Oregon where she didn't know anyone and didn't have to be reminded of what had happened. My father retreated into himself, becoming a recluse, a ghost of the man he had once been. He lived alone in the same house where I had grown up, surrounded by photographs of Michael, unable to move on, unable to let go. And I was left alone, the surviving son, the one who had to carry on, who had to keep living, who had to pretend that everything was fine when it was anything but. I threw myself into my work, building my construction company from the ground up, using the physical labor to exhaust myself so thoroughly that I didn't have the energy to think. I got married, had children, tried to build a life that looked normal from the outside. But inside, I was still that 25-year-old man, collapsing on the floor of his apartment, learning that his brother was dead. I followed Vincent Crane's life obsessively in the years after his release from prison. I knew where he lived, what he did for work, who he was married to. I knew that he had 2 daughters, both of them born after Michael's death. I knew that he volunteered at a soup kitchen on weekends and coached his daughter's soccer team. I knew that he had built a life for himself, a good life, a life he didn't deserve. And I hated him for it. I hated him with a purity and an intensity that was almost beautiful in its completeness. My hatred for Vincent Crane was the one constant in my life, the one thing I could always count on. It was my companion, my comfort, my reason for getting up in the morning. If I let go of my hatred, what would I have left? That was the question I wrestled with in the days that followed Whitmore's phone call. I told Elena about the letter, about the inheritance, about the condition. She listened in silence, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very softly, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to tear up the letter and forget this ever happened. The money isn't worth it. Nothing is worth forgiving that man. But another part of you is considering it," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. $12 million, Elena. That's life-changing money. We could pay off the mortgage. We could save the company. We could send the kids to whatever college they want. We could finally stop worrying about money every single day. But the price. I shook my head. How can I put a price on my brother's memory? How can I sell my hatred for $12 million? Elena reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was warm and steady, an anchor in the storm of my emotions. Your brother wouldn't want you to suffer, she said gently. He wouldn't want you to carry this hatred for the rest of your life. He would want you to be happy. He would want you to take care of your family. He loved you, Marcus. He loved you more than anything, and he would want you to be free of this pain. But he's not here to tell me that, I said, my voice breaking. He's not here because Vincent Crane killed him, and now I'm supposed to forgive the man who destroyed everything? How is that fair? How is that justice? It's not fair, Elena said. None of this is fair. But holding on to your hatred isn't hurting Vincent Crane. It's only hurting you. It's been hurting you for 15 years. It's been hurting our family. The kids can see it, Marcus. They can see the anger you carry. They can feel the tension in this house. And it's not their fault. They didn't ask for any of this. I pulled my hand away from hers, anger flaring in my chest. So I'm supposed to just forget what he did? I'm supposed to pretend it never happened? I'm supposed to sign a piece of paper and smile and tell him that everything is okay? No, Elena said, her voice still calm, still gentle. You're not supposed to forget. You're not supposed to pretend. But you can choose to let go. Not for him. For yourself. For us. For the life we could have if you weren't carrying this weight. I looked at my wife, at the lines of worry on her face and the love in her eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. She was right. She had always been right. My hatred was not protecting my brother's memory. It was not bringing him back. It was not punishing Vincent Crane. It was just poisoning me, day by day, year by year, until there was nothing left but the anger. In the end, it was my children who made the decision for me. My daughter Sophie, who was 12 years old, and my son Michael Jr., who was 10 and had been named after the uncle he would never meet. They didn't know the details of the situation, but they knew we were struggling. They had heard the arguments about money. They had seen the stress on my face, the way I snapped at them for small things, the way I retreated into silence at the dinner table. They had felt the tension that permeated our household, the sense that something was wrong, but no one would tell them what it was. One night, about a week after the letter arrived, Sophie came to me with a drawing she had made. It was a picture of our family, the four of us, standing in front of our house. We were all holding hands. We were all smiling. Above the picture, in careful, colorful letters, she had written a single word. Hope. I looked at that drawing, at the simple, innocent hope it represented, and I felt tears streaming down my face. My daughter believed in me. She believed that things could get better. She believed in a future where our family was happy and whole. And I realized, in that moment, that I had a choice to make. I could hold on to my hatred, protect it, nurture it, and let it continue to poison my life and the lives of the people I loved. Or I could let it go, not for Vincent Crane, not for the money, but for Sophie, for Michael Jr., for Elena, for the family I was trying to save. I called Jonathan Whitmore the next morning and told him I would do it. I would meet with Vincent Crane. I would sign the papers. I would forgive him. The meeting was scheduled for a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after I had first received the letter. Whitmore's office was in a skyscraper in the heart of the financial district, a building of glass and steel and polished marble that seemed designed to intimidate. I rode the elevator to the 37th floor, my heart pounding in my chest, my palms slick with sweat. Elena was beside me, holding my hand, her presence a steadying force in the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. The conference room was large and elegant, with a mahogany table that could seat 20 people and windows that looked out over the city skyline. The view was stunning, the kind of view that people paid millions of dollars for, but I barely noticed it. My attention was focused on the man sitting at the far end of the table. Vincent Crane. He looked older than I remembered. Of course he did. It had been 15 years since the trial, 15 years since I had last seen him in person. His hair, which had been dark and thick, was now gray and thinning. His face was lined with wrinkles, deep furrows carved by time, perhaps by guilt. He was thinner than I remembered, almost gaunt, as if he had been ill or as if the weight of what he had done had slowly eaten away at him. His eyes were downcast, fixed on the polished surface of the table, and his hands were clasped in front of him, the knuckles white with tension. When I walked into the room, he flinched. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible, but I caught it. He was afraid of me. After all these years, he was afraid of me. "Mr. Donovan," he said, his voice quiet and hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." I didn't respond. I just stood in the doorway, staring at him, feeling the hatred rise up in my chest like a physical force. This was the man who had killed my brother. This was the man who had destroyed my family. This was the man I had hated for 15 years, the man whose face I had imagined 1,000 times as I lay awake at night, fantasizing about revenge. And now he was sitting in front of me, old and broken and afraid, and I was supposed to forgive him. Jonathan Whitmore was there, along with several other lawyers and a notary. They explained the terms of the agreement, the legal document I would sign, the release of funds that would follow. I barely heard them. My attention was focused entirely on Vincent Crane, on the man who had haunted my nightmares for a decade and a half. And then, something unexpected happened. Vincent Crane began to speak. Not to the lawyers, not to the notary, to me. "I know you don't want to hear this," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I know there's nothing I can say that will make up for what I did. I know that words are cheap and apologies are meaningless, and nothing I can ever do will bring your brother back. But I need you to know that I think about it every day. Every single day, for 15 years, I have thought about what I did. I think about your brother. I think about the choice I made that night, the choice to get behind the wheel when I knew I shouldn't. I think about the life I took, and the pain I caused, and the family I destroyed. And I am so sorry. I am so deeply, profoundly, eternally sorry." He was crying now, tears streaming down his weathered face, his shoulders shaking with the force of his sobs. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued, his voice breaking on every word. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything. I know that. But I want you to know that I have spent the past 15 years trying to become a better person. I stopped drinking the day I got out of prison. I haven't had a single drop of alcohol since then. I started volunteering at a soup kitchen and then at a shelter for homeless veterans. I talk to kids about the dangers of drunk driving. I go to high schools and community centers and anywhere else that will have me, and I tell them my story. I tell them about the night I killed your brother. I tell them how one stupid, selfish decision destroyed so many lives. And I hope, I pray, that my words might prevent someone else from making the same mistake." He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, struggling to compose himself. "It will never be enough," he said quietly. "I know that. Nothing I do will ever be enough. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And if there's anything I can do, anything at all, to make amends, I'll do it. Just tell me what you need. Just tell me how I can help." I stood there, frozen, the hatred I had carried for so long warring with something else. Something unexpected. Something that felt almost like pity. The man before me was not a monster. He was a broken, pathetic, deeply remorseful human being who had done a terrible thing and had spent the rest of his life trying to atone for it. He had not walked away from the accident unscathed. He had been wounded, deeply wounded, in ways that were not visible on the surface but that were no less real. I thought about my brother, about Michael, about the way he had lived his life, with kindness and compassion and a generosity of spirit that I had always admired. Michael had been the kind of person who forgave easily, who believed in second chances, who saw the good in everyone. If he were here now, what would he want me to do? Would he want me to hold on to my hatred, to let it consume me, to pass it down to my children like a poisoned inheritance? Or would he want me to let it go, to choose love over anger, to choose healing over pain? I looked at Vincent Crane, at the tears streaming down his face, at the hands that were shaking with the force of his remorse. And I made a choice. "I forgive you," I said, and the words felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders, a weight I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. "I forgive you, Vincent. Not because you deserve it. Not because of the money, but because my brother would have wanted me to. Because he was a better person than I am, and he believed in forgiveness. And because I can't carry this hatred anymore. It's destroying me. It's destroying my family. And I don't want to be destroyed anymore. Vincent Crane broke down completely, sobbing into his hands, his entire body shaking with the release of emotions he had been holding in for 15 years. The lawyers exchanged glances, and Jonathan Whitmore stepped forward with a pen and a document. "Mr. Donovan," he said quietly, "if you're ready, we can finalize the agreement." I took the pen and signed my name on the line. The notary stamped the document. And just like that, it was done. I had forgiven the man who killed my brother. I had let go of the hatred that had defined my life for 15 years. And I had secured my family's future in the process. The money changed our lives, of course. We paid off the mortgage. We saved the company. We set up college funds for Sophie and Michael Jr., and we donated a portion of the inheritance to a charity that supports victims of drunk driving. We took a vacation, the first one in years, to a beach town where the children built sandcastles, and Elena and I walked hand in hand along the shore. We laughed. We talked. We dreamed about the future, a future that had suddenly become full of possibility instead of fear. But the real change, the transformation that mattered most, was not financial. It was the change that happened inside me, the healing that began when I finally let go of the hatred I had been carrying for so long. I still think about Michael every day. I still miss him. I still grieve for the life he never got to live. But the anger is gone. The bitterness is gone. And in their place is something I never expected to find. Peace. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not about the person who wronged you. It is not about letting them off the hook or pretending that what they did was acceptable. It is about yourself. It is about choosing to let go of the poison that is eating you from the inside. It is about reclaiming your life from the people who have hurt you. It took a stranger's will and $12 million to teach me that lesson. But now that I've learned it, I will carry it with me for the rest of my life. I have not seen Vincent Crane since that day in Whitmore's office. I don't know if I ever will. But I no longer wish him harm. I no longer lie awake at night fantasizing about revenge. I have let him go, and in doing so, I have freed myself. My brother would be proud.